Start this meeting, and everyone else can catch up. I do know 3 of my other colleagues are expected to attend this afternoon. Okay. I was going to take the first 4 items on consent. We do have a card on item number 3, so I will go ahead and we will do 1, 2, and 4. And I will hopefully get my colleagues to approve that as well. Item number 3, Mr. Sachs. Item number 3. I was going to do a consent item, but I usually, in committee, take cards even there. I'm all for public comment.
Is it public comment or item?
No. Comment on items. We're supposed to have a public hearing in committee before it goes to council. So if I have a card, I do that.
I know this isn't the proper committee, but nevertheless, since you are doing some renewal of temporary preferential parking district, the area around the Grove, I was wondering if you might also double check to see on how the methane mitigation program is around the Grove, how that is headed up, how that's going, and if there's any problem, because in the future items on your agenda, you're going to talk about funding for projects, and because of the methane gas that leaked out of the 3rd and Fairfax area when they were, whatever project was funded, don't know about that yet, but they had the gas leak. So I was just curious, kind of tying it all together. They have a mitigation program like they have at Playa Vista. They have a mitigation program like they have at the downtown high school complex that just opened up. I've never heard of one.
You might check that's not a DOT issue. It's really related to Public Works, but and with CD5, I apologize. I don't have the answer for that, but
never. Like I said, I could tie it in there. I could tie it in. You're looking for funding, also from the government and for MTA projects, calls for projects. So I'd really like to know who or what funded the digging at 3rd and Fairfax.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
That'll be on, hopefully on consent when my colleagues get here. Anne, do you want to go ahead and give public comment now, or you want to wait till some of my colleagues get here? Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I just didn't also want to leave you to the end, so we'll try to squeeze in there. Okay, our next item.
Item number 5 is the DOT report relative to the status of the city's efforts on the safety loo reauthorization.
Maybe I would like my colleagues on 5, 6, and 7 are all kind of related a bit. I'll wait till my colleagues get here. Why don't we go on to item number 8?
Item number 8 is the CLA report relative to the parking cash out program.
I'm sorry, what did you say? What are these for? This is for the Oh. And one for the wine. So 3. Hi.
Hi, good afternoon. Alex Moya from the CLA. This office, with the assistance of the Office of the City Attorney and the Office of Finance, has analyzed the various financial and legal impacts to the city should the parking cash out law be implemented. The Office of Finance has identified that the parking cash out program will impact an estimated 333 employers within the city. Thus, a sizable amount of staff and resources would be necessary to ensure employers' compliance with the law. The most cost-efficient method for the city to monitor these programs and other legal mandates for employers would be to require employers to submit a plan defining goals and progress in reducing traffic congestion in the city, which could be achieved through an amendment to the city's current transportation demand management ordinance.
Okay. So if we amend the ordinance, this is as I authored this, so I know it's a state law that they're required to meet, but they currently, not necessarily all of them do meet that requirement.
Currently, state law does not enforce the parking cash out law, but it is explicitly required in state law.
Okay, so the actions that we're recommending in the report is that we're going to ask the city attorney to prepare and present the changes to to our ordinance that exists.
That's correct. In addition to recommending a change or an amendment to state law.
Right. Okay. And how long do we think it will take for the city, because we gathered this information, how long ago, Maria?
Don't ask. A couple years.
That's an honest answer, okay. I think it was at least a year and a half ago, if not more. 06, yeah. So I'm going to ask that we get this language back within 30 days.
30 days, okay.
And the time on the CLA to sponsor support legislation, clearly January is the month in which they submit all of their bills.
The CLA is putting together a report right now that identifies the legislative proposals, so I believe that's included in that.
Okay. Great. Okay. All right. So we will adopt the CLA report that is before us. But we can tell city attorney with 30 days.
Yeah, and there was one issue that DOT, I think, brought up that changing the ordinance, our current ordinance, we need to look at it forward. I mean, some of that
Yes.
was for developments in the past. We need to figure out a way to do that. So we'll have a report in 30 days and see where we are. It may take a little bit longer, but I know it's a priority for you.
And I think we need to make sure that in the Office of Finance, when they go out with their forms again in January, that it includes this language still.
Right.
To be honest with you, I don't remember. I know we did it that one year, but it should, in every subsequent year, businesses should be required to fill out, do you have leased parking? I think there was a particular line. So we don't have anyone from Office of Finance here, do we? Nope.
Carl Sampson, Office of Finance, and yes, we do have the language
Okay.
on the forms.
I would assume you wouldn't have taken it off, but I just
Yeah.
to make
We kept it.
sure that it will be included in this year so that as we move forward on that notification. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. And when you look at the fact you said 333 businesses, that is a big number in which hopefully, again, depending on how much leased parking they have, could make a big difference if people are willing to take public transportation because of that subsidy that they won't be paying for the leased parking. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And before we take action on that, Mr. Alex Sachs would like to comment on item number 8. Oh, I called you Alex Sachs. I know an Alex Sachs. Sorry, Arnold. Arnold Sachs.
Certainly not me.
That's all right.
Just very quickly, say cash out program. I'm not totally familiar with this, but since I'd like to touch the base, do you get when's an update on the report? I know that their airport parking was at one time a contentious item, and it was here in front of this committee, I believe. Could you get an update on how the parking program is there? The
Airport parking, you mean as far as,
the management for the terminal parking.
it was part of the master plan that they're doing for the whole location. You mean as far as having a separate
Didn't they change the company that runs the?
Are you talking about the taxi, the AT?
Taxi.
No. I'm talking about regular people parking. Didn't they change the concession? The people who run the parking concession, basically.
They did a few years ago.
I
Yes.
thought it was less than that. I mean, I thought, and
Yeah.
it's come back before there was problems with the contract. I was just
Okay.
FYIing,
Okay.
find out if there is any relationship between that, if there could be an update on how the airport parking program is running.
Thank you. Yes, please. Mr. Rosendahl, with your approval, we'd like to, 1 through 4 were preferential parking districts, and get your approval with me. And item 8, we're going to adopt the CLA's report and ask the city attorney to come back in 30 days. With the draft.
good.
Okay. Why don't we go to item number 9?
Item number 9 is the Labange Grove motion relative to the city's crossing guard program.
Good afternoon. Amir Sadati, Assistant General Manager, LADOT. I'm joined here with Captain Christine Mata. We have already had a few good meetings on this, council member, and there's obviously different issues with regards to operational safety and as well as funding. So what we're requesting is to be able to report back in 60 days with all of those issues identified, and working with Dunn and of course the council offices and CLA and CAO on these issues, and be able to report back in 60 days.
And have we always only done just elementary school?
Yes, that's
We've
been...
never had middle school in the past.
No, we've not done that in the past, so that's why this is a new era for us, and we're also working with the county of Los Angeles also has a crossing guard program, so we're sharing some stories with them and really looking outside the box. But I think some of the major challenges will become the issues of the warrants, as well as, I think, funding, because we know that funding will become an issue, that we're not going to be able to do this citywide. So, and all those challenges and issues we'd like to bring back so that you have all of the information before you can make any recommendations.
Okay. And on average, how much does it cost per school at elementary school? I know middle schools are larger and probably would be a different cost, but
It's about $10,000 per school for an average of 4 hours per school.
4 hours per school for one crossing guard.
Yeah.
Okay. But in other, I mean, if you had,
Right, if we're required to stay there longer, it'd be.
right. Okay. Yes.
I'd like to ask a question, because I'm really glad you brought it up. Mark Twain Middle School is in my district. Wallgrove Elementary is contiguous to it, and on the other side is Beethoven Elementary, okay? Literally, a dear friend lives across the street, has 3 boys. 2 of the boys now are still in Beethoven Elementary, and the oldest one now just made it to Mark Twain Middle School, okay? And he goes to the cross street. He's a little kid. I mean, he ain't very tall either. And the crossing guard realizes that he's going to the middle school, Mark Twain, not to the Wallgrove school next door, and would not assist him in crossing. The guard clearly said, "I'm sorry, I only handle elementary school," even though they're contiguous buildings, and one would think a kid is a kid, or even an adult is an adult, and any kind of an opportunity to assist a person in safety would be real. Is that us doing this, or is that the LAUSD? Who is doing that?
Let us get back to your office specifically, Councilmember. I don't have the specifics for that particular school. If you can let us know maybe the date and location and the
Yeah,
time.
it's very simple. It's on Wallgrove, and it's the middle school, Mark Twain Middle School. And I don't know the exact cross street, but that's right in front of the school is there. And this incident was brought to my attention by my neighbor, banged on the door. I mean, my constituents come to my door, too. And in that context, was clearly told that she asked, or whoever asked, are you in the middle school or in the elementary school? Mm-hmm. So it is a big issue for me. I obviously believe, and I have 2 little nephews myself, Robbie Paul and Ricky Luke, who go to Orville Wright Middle School, and they walk to school too. So I think middle schools should have cross guards, be it paid by the city or paid by LAUSD or a combination or whatever. So in the report back, I would love to understand specifically Mark Twain this very moment. Because
Sure, and we'll actually have some information before that for you on that specific location. We'll research it and get back to your office.
Very good.
We'll get
very
back
good.
to your office.
Okay, but the overall policy you're going to come back with, right?
Overall
For our
policy
middle
that includes funding, who can pay, what does it cost?
Just delighted.
Operationally, what is that going to affect us as far as issues with, overall program of the elementary schools and what we have in the queue as far as new elementary schools coming
Yes.
versus the lot of, intermediate schools out there and how that's going to be all worked out. So.
Great, and can we also in that data see if there's ever been a safety issue of a kid getting hit or something happened? Maybe you take just a picture of a period in time, so that would add even more credibility to the notion that.
We have representatives here from the LA Unified.
Oh, that's great.
Mr. Trujillo is a great representative.
Hello.
Okay, Luis, give us a little report.
Hi, my name is Lorenzo Trujillo. I'm the School Traffic Safety Coordinator with Los Angeles Unified School District, Office of Environmental Health and Safety. I'm the one-man show for the district that responds to all the traffic safety in all the schools in the district. And regarding your issue on Mark Twain, I've actually been out there, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Getting back to the issue of crossing guards at middle schools with accidents, we did have an incident at Wilmington Middle School down off of PCH at a crosswalk, and the crossing guard would not cross the middle school kids, and one of the middle school kids ended up getting hit.
Oh,
because the
Lord.
crossing
Where
guard
was this?
there. This was back in April
And where was it?
at PCH in Ronan, which is down, PCH in Ronan, which is down like Wilmington, I believe.
Councilmember Hans, this.
Yeah.
So, and that's not the only incident we've had. We've actually had a couple of other incidents at middle schools where the kids get hit, and the principal give our office a call, and I got to go to the school and explain to them what we can do. And in the past, we haven't been able to provide a crossing guard because it's never been there for us to provide it, only for elementary school kids. So, if you're asking me, I think it's a wonderful idea, and thank you, Tom LeBon's office, for helping us with this.
Yeah, as a wonderful idea. Who provides it now?
The city does. The city of Los
our
Angeles Park and
responsibility.
Enforcement provides.
For our kids,
Yeah.
I see. And you don't do that in any city?
Not that if it's a smaller city, like we have other cities like Gardena, Southgate.
Sure.
From my understanding, no one provides it. The county doesn't provide it. The city doesn't provide it. It's never really been. How would I say it? It has been a problem when we have kids get hit, but when the smaller children get hit, it's more serious. So, and there's more elementary schools than there are middle schools. To give you an idea, there's over 700 elementary schools, and there's only about 105 middle schools in LA.
You know what's also interesting, which is a new change? Remember the bus-in was the name of the game?
Mm-hmm.
So the kids were bused into the campuses. Now what's happened throughout the whole city is kids are walking to their school, and as we build 100 new schools, they're literally in new areas walking to their schools. And the dynamic in my district, frankly, is that the bused-in kids aren't coming anymore, but the kids in the neighborhood are now all coming to the schools. And so there's literally a lot more kids walking to school today than there was just 10 years ago when everybody was kind of bussed in and other ones went and, Ma took them in the SUV kind of thing. We physically have more walking going on getting to the school. So I think it's something that obviously needs to be considered and looked at from both the LAUSD standpoint as well as DOT. Do you want to say something?
Well, I'm not with the LAUSD. I'm with Councilman Labange's office. I'm his field deputy.
No, you're not my field deputy. You're
I'm sorry,
my-
education deputy. Just started a couple of months ago.
Very good.
But
Mary Rodriguez is an excellent example of a dedicated person with her own family, helped improve the middle school, took effort to improve the quality of education at King Middle School, and then also at John Marshall. And I said, I don't want to run the schools of Los Angeles. I want to help the schools. And Mary is the one who's reaching out. Mary, go ahead.
yeah, and the first thing I did was go to meet all of the principals at each of the schools in Council District 4, and overwhelmingly, traffic was the number one issue, over and over and over again. And throughout this year, I've been working very closely with Lorenzo and with the Commission for Children, Youth, and Their Families to get safety valet programs started. Some of our middle schools are in such incredible, so many traffic-related problems. We've had DOT come out there. We have video surveillance going on and traffic, because we don't have a crossing guard. Actually, I have officers directing the traffic now, which is very expensive, to try to get some of these issues underhand. And in this last year, we had 5 students wounded by vehicles at Thomas Stark King Middle School. One of them seriously injured in April, still out of school. But the end of last school year, we had also 3 accidents at Burroughs Middle School. So we really know that the middle schools are very much in need of assistance with the crossing guard.
And thanks to the leadership of DOT under Rita Robinson and Jimmy Price, they assigned a traffic officer at King Middle School, which is a T intersection. In it's a multiply zoned area, but it helps try to get the crossing about. And one of the interesting things about schools is that they are generators. I know my son Charles, who's 10, he rides his bike to school. I pray a lot of Hail Marys there all that hour.
I would imagine.
20 minutes, but he rides his bike to school, and they'd have a crossing guard at Silver Lake and Rowena, which helps them there. But this is a good thing. They're going to report back to us, Madam Chair.
They're gonna report
We have
back
the public comment. Thank you.
And we also have a letter from school board member Tamar Gallitson's office, fully in support of this.
Correct. You could present it to the clerk.
Okay.
Thank you. Educational deputy. Give this to the clerk.
We've got good staff.
Okay, thank
So, we'll have a report in 60 days to come back with that and to see what we can do to be helpful. Mr. LeBonge, if you're okay with items 1 through 4 and now 8 and 9?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Why don't we just go to the last item, and then we'll go back to those 3 that are...
Item number 10 is a Smith rule motion relative to requesting an ordinance to prohibit the use of diesel engine brakes in residential areas.
Hi, how are you? Good afternoon.
State your name for the record.
Yes, my name is Hannah Lee with Councilman Smith's office. Good afternoon, council members. Councilman Smith actually introduced this motion to address the issue of diesel engine brakes in primarily equestrian areas in the district. I do understand that there are some things that we need to discuss further with DOT and the city attorney. So we'd like to continue those discussions and possibly ask for a report back from the departments.
Great. I think we had in our notes to ask for that you and the city attorney report back on the motion in 60 days.
Yes, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you. So that'll be the item, that'll be the order, excuse me, on item number 10.
So moved.
Thank you.
5? Yes.
Okay, item number 5 is the DOT report relative to the status of the city's efforts on the safety loo reauthorization.
Excuse me, I'm so handle it. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Weno. I'm with the Department of Transportation. This is a status report on the reauthorization efforts of the department. I wanted to explain briefly what reauthorization is. Safety loo reauthorization and transportation authorization, they're kind of all the same thing. And basically what it is every 6 years the federal government sets out their kind of short-range plan for how what programs and policies and what funding maximums they're going to set for the next 6 years. In the past, you may have known them as ICE-T, T21, Safety Loo. They're all kind of the same thing. They just cover different periods of time. And we're now approaching the end of Safety Loo, and the federal government will be getting ready to vote on their next bill sometime next year, I hope. Some of the examples of programs that are in Safety Loo or in reauthorization or authorization bills are congestion mitigation, air quality, the Highway Bridge Program, Surface Transportation Program, and transportation enhancement activities. Also included within the authorization bill are high priority demonstration projects, or what's around in the news a lot these days, the Earmark Projects. These Earmark Projects are specifically written into the legislation, so there's a line item description of the project, basically the title of the project. In Safety Loo, the average grant award was about $800,000 per project, so they're relatively small projects. Under Safety Loo, each congressional office had $13 million to distribute throughout its district. It's not a very large amount of money per congressional district. There are a lot of problems with earmarking that we've experienced over the previous years. The first is that in creating the bill, usually they ask everybody for their earmarks, and when it gets to Washington, there's usually too much in expenses and not enough in revenues.
Shocking.
And so they make an across-the-board cut. Rather than keeping some projects in and throwing some projects out, they just cut across the board. So if you ask for a $1.2 million project, right away you're only going to get $1 million. Another problem is that they don't program the projects by schedule. They don't say this project's going to go first, and so we're going to fund it early, and this project's going to go later, and we're going to fund it later. They just fund each of the projects evenly across the 6 or 5 years in Safety Loo of the bill, which creates a major problem because you can't start construction on your project until you have all your money available. And so right now, even in Safety Lou, we're starting the last year of Safety Lou, but there has been no appropriations bill to appropriate the money for that last year. And so we can't start construction on those projects even now. And so, that's kind of a project.
They did a continuing resolution.
Did a continuing resolution, and that continues funding for the programs, but it doesn't continue funding for the individual projects, the high priority projects. And so they're all stuck.
Oh, God.
And so as a result of the way that this is working in Washington, we end up with shortfalls on every project. We end up with delays, and projects can't be delivered till after the authorization period. And so we've looked at a proposal to try and remedy some of these problems. And what we're proposing for kind of the first tier of projects is a program of projects, of really small projects. It would be implement a program of traffic safety and roadway improvements in a particular area. And examples might be traffic signals or roadway repair, speed feedback signs, and other low-cost safety improvements that we can do in-house. The benefits of this are that the projects are scalable. So as they get cut down through the process, we don't end up scrambling for more money necessarily, but we scale down the number of projects that we do, and so we can do those without having to scramble around and look for additional funding. Another benefit of this is that safety projects and roadway repair type projects don't get funded through the call at all. MTA's big issue is getting to conformity, air quality conformity, and usually they have to scramble around to make that, so they're reluctant to spend other dollars on other projects, safety projects and roadway repair projects. But I think the really big benefit about these kinds of projects is when they're done with city staff, we don't have to wait till the end of the authorization period to do this. When they're done by city staff, we can do, if we get $200,000 the first year, we can do $200,000 worth of work. We can design a small project and implement it. We don't have to wait till the end of the authorization period. And I think that's attractive both for council members and especially for the congressional offices, because I think they would like to see projects on the road as soon as possible also. They don't want to wait for 6 years to see projects. And so I think this might be attractive to them and give us hopefully an advantage in trying to get more money for the city through the authorization.
Now, we made comments overall to the kind of general
Yes.
far-reaching safety loo kind of process.
Yes.
Conceptually, goals, strategies, kinds of things versus the project-by-project piece of it. I have heard conflicting kind of, should we move right away on identifying the projects, or how long, whether or not even safety loo will be reauthorized next year, and it's because of the challenges they're facing in Washington, D.C. I'd rather be prepared than not prepared in that instance to have projects that go forward. And I know that Councilmember Parks had introduced a motion, particularly, we didn't read it because that he was concerned after the last safety loo that there were certain parts of the city that were very successful in getting their funds, and others that were not so successful in getting funds. Those of us that live in the valley were lucky. We had a couple of congressional members that really advocated, some which were projects we never even heard of, but we try to, I think that's why we'd like to have this discussion early on versus later in that way. So the plan for the department is to talk, I know you've met with some council offices, but to continue to talk with council offices about priorities and looking how they fit in with our overall strategy on those areas, projects that we may be talking about in the past, and that we can move forward and leverage dollars. So have you met with some of the council offices?
We've met with 11 of the council offices so far.
I'm sorry, 11 and?
11 so far.
Oh, 11. Oh, Lucky you. Okay, 11.
No. 11 offices.
And actually, 11
Oh, 11
was first.
offices.
11
oh,
offices.
Oh, I
yeah.
thought you said 11, just 11.
No,
Okay,
no,
11
no.
offices.
We met
Right.
with 11 offices,
I
but
thought that
11
was odd.
was first.
Well, the first shall be last. I'm just wondering if our federal guy could come up and react a little bit on this for us, if it's okay.
Sure. Jump right in. And then, Michael, when we have a chance on there's the recommended safety project bundles. Maybe you could describe that after.
Yes.
Thank you. Mike and I have had
And just
I'm
state your
Jim
name.
Clark, Director of Federal Relations for the Mayor's Office. Mike and I have had a chance to meet a couple times and have phone conversations on this as well. And in the packet, I think in the memo that was prepared by Rita Robinson that you probably have, there's a list of the projects that are divided up by congressional districts. And one of the things that we want to do, we'll be having a meeting with the congressional district staff on November 6th, and we're going to share with them the lists of the projects that we're looking at. But what we want to do is try to, when we have, because as you said, there will be more projects than there will be funding available, but we want to make sure that the priorities are there, both that the council offices are putting forward and the mayor's office is putting forward as well, and that those priorities try to steer them in a direction so that there is sufficient funding in each of the council districts as well too. So when they have a choice to make decisions that we can have that happen. So we are working together to try and make sure that
And
happens.
I do think, though, just to jump in here, as much as I want to have projects that actually are going to happen. So if it's a congressional district that may only be able to fund that one project, if CD2 doesn't get that one, but we get one that actually is going to happen, I would rather we have those projects that actually work versus trying to split it 15 ways. That's my own personal opinion, is that we've got to have projects that make sense. And so really look in that congressional district. And if it can, great, but I think ours should be those projects that can really actually meet the needs. Did you want to talk about, go ahead.
Well, what I'd like to even take it a step further. November 4th is less than 2 weeks away. Right. After November 4th, I'd like you to take a deep breath and give us a list of the projects that are under consideration there now. From my end, I have 3 members of the House of Representatives in my district, Waxman, Harmon, and Maxine Waters. I want to know exactly if those 3 have anything happening or could get something going. I expect the politics back there to be such that it gives me a chance to try to bring home the bacon. And my district, as you know, is the most gridlocked district in the city, and whatever I can do on traffic relief, there's all kinds of monies that could conceivably come forward for us. So those are my 3 people, and I'd like to see for the whole council. The next thing is the Wilshire Bus Lane only. We've had money committed. I just want to make sure that money doesn't disappear, dry up, or change. We're publicly committed, as we know, with the EIR, with the MTA and us, and we're moving along. That is a very critical element for me. And then obviously your own analysis of the politics and what we can go back with other ideas. Because I have a sense, it's just my own instinct, that we're in the New Deal day of the new moment, 2008, and we all know that transportation infrastructure is multiplier effect, creates jobs, and I can see our federal government being a little bit more proactive in going monies back to cities for jobs, because this moment is so critical that I have a good sense that we're going to see that happening, and I would like LA, obviously, to be in the front door there pushing for that stuff. That's all. Thank you.
As you know, Councilman, the economic stimulus package that's being talked about as a possible one is heavily laden with infrastructure projects.
Yeah, and I've heard every economist or alleged know-it-all type, everybody basically saying transportation infrastructure or the crumbling bridges or anything to do with our infrastructure is the kind of jobs that Roosevelt did that moved us forward, that I hope our next president will do.
Plus, those are the jobs you can't outsource either. So.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. They need to be here. Well, not outsourced. They're not going to be jobs that happen in Dubai. They're going to be here.
Oh, Richard's here. Hello, Richard.
So I know that we have a deadline, or a kind of Boxer and Feinstein have asked for in November for it to get our feedback on this. I think that's what we had heard. And so I think the recommendation was ask DOT to return at the November 6th with your recommendations. colleagues, I don't know if you have any questions of them. We do have 2 public comment cards, if they'd like to come up here. Damian Goodman and Stephen Box. I see Stephen, I don't see Damian. You can stay. Oh, Damian's. Whichever you like. I think she's going to see if she can turn on the timing. Oh, sorry. 2 minutes, thank you. Okay.
Good afternoon. The following statement should be considered an attempt to exhaust administrative and local legislative options to correct violations of federal civil rights laws and Executive Order 12898, the Environmental Justice Executive Order signed by Bill Clinton in 1994. The failure to address the South LA community issues regarding the Expo line has both local and regional transportation implications. I've spoken about the local many times, the safety issue, worsened traffic, restricted access to parks, and divided communities. But the bus lane, especially on Wilshire, and the whole concept of safety loo, brings up the regional impacts of building the Expo line at street level through majority, minority, and or low-income communities in South LA. The Wilshire subway was discontinued in 1998 after the ban on using local sales tax money on subways was passed. It was a ban on locals, not state or federal, an important point. However, the replacement of that line was to be the Expo line and to be a bus line by down Wilshire. Equally, the subway going east into East LA was canceled, and the replacement line was to be a light rail line, which is currently being built. Expo's being built, East Side Line's being built. Now that's important because in the MIS that was done and in the EIR that was draft EIR that was done, the Expo line and the Expo line and the Wilshire corridor were part of the same study. The impacts of a bus lane are reasonably near the impacts of a light rail line. And one goes down a majority minority community, the other goes down a very affluent community. What I'm saying is, if the Expo line is built either in the manner in which it is, you're jeopardizing all your federal funding. Because if you attempt to pursue a Wilshire subway, you're jeopardizing your federal funding by attempting to pursue a Wilshire subway. Because if you build a subway on that corridor, after forcing East LA and South LA to accept light rail at grade, you have projects which are basically going through black and brown communities, given by, funded by a federal agency with terribly disparate impacts. So address it. And I see my council member's not here, but I'd hope he would.
Great.
So we can have that important project.
And I would share, make sure to share that with his staff, which I'm sure you may have already, but as you heard, each of the council offices are being visited by the department to see what priorities would be there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephen.
Stephen Box, Bike Riders Collective. How are you?
Hi. Good.
Thanks for the opportunity to address the Transportation Committee. Just a quick comment, and that is that it appears that the safety loop projects are evaluated based on the Congress rep members. It says here, soliciting projects from the Mayor's Office, the City Council, private entities, and city staff. But the process for the city includes working with the Mayor's Office, the Council Office, Bureau of Engineering, Street Lighting, Street Services, and I imagine all the people that have a piece of the asphalt except for the neighborhood councils and the public themselves, the ones that actually use them. Council member Bernard Parks was at the Neighborhood Council Congress 2 weeks ago and offered up what a great opportunity Safety Lou was for us to partner in advocating for great projects. After all, we're the ones that trip over the curb or try to cross the street or have to get kids to school. Councilwoman Gruhl joined us in the Valley as we took on transportation and looked for opportunities to partner with each other. And so I would suggest that projects that have the support of the community in advance would flow to the top much quicker. And also projects that get approved that have the support of the community aren't going to be tripped up by questions that weren't answered or addressed in the process in advance of the whole. So we have projects that are funded now that aren't going to get out of the tube, so to speak, simply because there are unanswered questions or things that didn't come up until after the fact. Some projects, Metro Call for projects, you get 5 points for just having community support. Safe routes to school, there's a category for community support, and yet the process is one where we find out last, and we don't really have a strong process. I know that the deadline is coming up, they're always coming up, which is why it's unfortunate that we have to actually fight hard, request in writing, request using Public Records Act requests to get information so that we can advocate, support, get ours in there, find out if ours are in there. We don't even know sometimes. And so on that note, I would like to advocate again that whatever the process is, that it includes the neighborhood councils. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, if I could just ask us, I mean, it's a no-brainer for me. Neighborhood councils, homeowners groups, others that represent the people, are they not part of this process?
In the past, we've looked to the council offices to try and give us direction on how to deal with the neighborhood councils because there are so many of them and we have so little time.
So you ask the council offices to go out to their neighborhood councils and get their feedback, and then they give it to you?
Or I assume that the council offices are doing that regularly. They're working with their neighborhood councils and they know what the issues are there. And so that's where we were hoping to get this input. We are seeking input from all the council offices.
And this list, the list that's attached to your report, I think, is it considered an attachment?
Yes.
The Metro 2007 call for projects, which are ones that have been listed in the past, and one of the things we're trying to do is ensure that all of the projects are on a list, so that we're not recreating the wheel each time, so that for a community, Stephen and Damien, to know that they're on the list, and it will always be part of the discussion when it goes forward and how the prioritization, because we shouldn't have to, each time there's a new call for projects, create a new list. Each time there's a new, again, sometimes things have changed in that period of time, but at least there's a basic list of what you go off of, and that list coming from the council offices. So I think as you meet with the council offices, as you have interaction with council offices that represent you, and share with the rest of the committee, it is important to have that as part as we going forward, because we have had projects in the past which were on the list the community didn't know and they were adamantly opposed to. I can think of a few of those because they had not been part of it or understood it, and they went by the wayside, and when we apply then we look foolish because we haven't been able to do that.
Yeah, and I'd just like to get another step further. I have an empowerment Congress with the Transportation Committee, plus I have 8 neighborhood councils. We have a bureaucracy here for neighborhood councils, and we have websites and everything else. How about you linking your stuff to them and let one of the neighborhood council people in our city government communicate that to the neighborhood council? My people all look at that stuff constantly, and it would be very easy to always give a questionnaire or an update that they could pull down. It's not my staff. My staff's everywhere all the time. But, I mean, we have a bureaucracy here now, people on the payroll whose job it is to liaison with the 90 or so neighborhood councils. So just have a link between your operation and the neighborhood council downtown operation, and let them take that responsibility of communicating to the neighborhood councils.
Yes.
So if we could have have a conversation with Dunn as well and see what the best way is to ensure that communication.
We did, yeah.
And get back to us with that.
Okay.
So they're going to come back November 6th.
Great.
So we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Thank you.
And ask neighborhood council leadership to come here. I mean,
Just 2 points. Oh, I'm sorry. 2 points. Firstly, we like Rita a lot more than we like Bernie. So Rita always comes. But regarding the call for projects, on our neighborhood council perspective, we've had a lot of projects that probably should be on that list, and people don't even know it exists, call for projects. That's kind of Metro's issue. But if there is a better connection can be made, some of these great things that are coming can be considered. And sometimes they're not always getting up to the council's office because he does have a lot of proposals submitted to him. I understand that.
Okay. Thank you. Next item.
Item number 6 is the DOT report in response to a Rule Rosendahl motion relative to an examination of the federal, state, and local funding sources that support the city's transportation projects and programs.
Okay. This is going to briefly discuss, in very, very broad brushstrokes, how we fund transportation in the city of Los Angeles and what the major problem is that's facing us. These are the major funding sources. There's federal excise tax, there's state excise tax, those are per gallon fees. There's the federal government collects car and truck sales tax, and that goes into the Highway Trust Fund. The state collects commercial vehicle fees, and that goes into the state highway account. In addition, in Los Angeles County, we've passed 2 local sales tax increments of a half cent each. And so we get that for transportation. And then more recently, we get the significant amount of state sales tax on fuel, motor vehicle fuel sales. And that's a fairly recent issue. This is about how the money looks. I mean, the biggest sources of funds are the state excise tax, Prop C local return, Prop A local return, and then we've pulled out quite a bit of funding from the call for projects every year. And then Prop 42 is the new one, and that's quite a large chunk now also.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
Before you go too much further, on the first chart you mentioned sales tax.
Yes.
On cars.
Yes.
I was under the impression that we did not control the amount on the sales tax.
I'm sorry, we control?
I was under the impression that the city did not have control over the amount we charge the sales tax.
We do not, but we receive some of the money.
Okay. The way that you mentioned it, you said we created a local sales tax.
Oh.
The city.
No, not the city, the county. Locally, LA County.
Actually, I thought it was a statewide.
No. The sales tax that we created were Prop A and Prop C. I'm sorry.
I thought you said for motor vehicles.
Yeah, that was a motor vehicles. That's not within our control, but we get part of it through the Highway Trust Fund.
He gave you this document that has.
Yeah, it's in the first chart, but.
I'm
on the first chart,
Yes, this one.
Yeah, on that one, where you said local sales tax increments, you said motor on cars.
No, I meant the sales tax, the state sales tax on the fuel sales.
Oh, okay.
Motor vehicle fuel sales. I'm sorry. I'm glad someone's listening.
Or not listening.
So this is about $350 million annually. One of the major problems with the way we fund transportation is that the biggest parts come from the federal and state excise tax on fuel, and those taxes do not increase with increasing use. I mean, it's fixed. It's been fixed. I'm sorry. They don't increase with inflation. That's the big problem. They increase with increasing use. The more you drive, the more gas you use, the more you pay. Then it doesn't capture the increasing fuel efficiency in our vehicle fleet, nor does it capture alternatively fueled vehicles for the most part. But it does, and it does not increase it with inflation, and that's a big deal. This chart shows what the problem is. The blue line represents cost of living increases, just straight cost of living CPI, and we're down about 60 to 65% of what we were when we started collecting the tax at this rate. But the bigger problem is that construction costs have increased faster than CPI in general, and there we're looking at in 1994, if we paid $100,000 for a project, today that $100,000 only buys us 40% of the project. That's the major problem. That's a big deal. Sales taxes are similar to fuel taxes in that the sales taxes on fuel sales are similar to fuel taxes, excise taxes, in that they increase with increasing use. The more you drive, the more gas you purchase, the more sales tax you pay. But it doesn't keep up with the fuel-efficient vehicles nor the alternatively fueled vehicles. But it does somewhat keep up with cost of living. To the extent the cost of living and construction costs are in line, they keep up fine. Most recently, we had that little problem, major problem, with construction costs increasing much faster than CPI and much faster than historical trends. Proposition C, we get about $50 million a year. It's the half-cent sales tax. It increases with inflation, as I've said before. And it can be used for a number of things, to improve transit service and operations, but also to reduce congestion, improve air quality, improve streets and freeways used by transit, and reduce our dependence on foreign fuel.
Proposition 42 is sales tax on fuel. A certain portion of that has been cut out and dedicated as local return back to cities for roadway rehab and maintenance. And we get about $40 million of that a year. The state can borrow against that, and you've probably heard about that threat looming with the state budget problem. But Prop 42 is somewhat protected because the state must repay with interest, and they must repay within 4 years. And that's kind of discouraged them from taking it, at least so far, because basically they have to turn around and repay a part of it the following year. Surface Transportation Program local funds are part of the federal excise tax. The state established the minimum that goes to local entities, the cities of LA County and the county. That amount has not increased since 1992. STP as a whole has increased, but that portion dedicated to local has not. The city uses this for resurfacing and capital. The remainder of STP goes to access services right now, which is the parallel paratransit service for those people that can't use regular bus service. Proposition A is the half-cent sales tax that's fully dedicated to transit. It can't be used for much else. We use it for our transit services, Commuter Express, Dash, City Ride, Charter Bus, and we use it to build some transit facilities, park and ride lots, and other intermodal facilities like that. FTA section 5307 comes from the federal excise tax. It provides capital money for the purchase of vehicles. The MTA distributes it based on bus fleet and service characteristics of each of the included operators, and it's used primarily for bus purchases. I guess you could use it for a bus yard or other bus facilities. This is kind of an indication of where we're headed. As you can see, in previous calls, the average amount in the call was about $500 million. In 2000, 2001, there was a little blip because at that time we thought transportation revenues were going to be much higher than they actually were. We had a surplus in the Highway Trust Fund that was being injected at that time, and so that one's a little bit of blip, but we're talking about $500 million about for the call for projects. And in the 2009 call, we're looking at $132 million only if Measure R doesn't pass. The reason for that is that I know this is a really complicated slide, but basically it's the same slide duplicated twice. And it's there to show just the change. And the change that's happened is that the Highway Trust Fund money used to gets injected into the state highway account. And the state highway account money used to be used to fund the STIP, which are the capital programs throughout the state, which goes into our call for projects, and fund the SHOP, which is Caltrans's maintenance account. They use it to maintain the state highways.
Can I interrupt you for a quick second?
Sure.
You know, when you put call for projects, it was 503 in 1995, yes. Right? And you're telling me that in 2009 we're at 132?
Yes.
And we have the greater need now than ever in our history.
Yes.
How does that happen like that?
Well, that's what's on the next slide.
$1 trillion bailout.
This is what's on the next slide. The way it used to go is on the left, and the money from the state highway account, which include the state highway account and the highway trust fund, the federal money, used to get divided into the STIP, the capital improvement program, and into the SHOP, the state highway maintenance program. What's happened now is that all that money goes into the SHOP. The state legislation requires that CTC give priority to maintaining the existing infrastructure. And so right now the SHOP is funded at about $2.2 billion, and they estimate that they need $4.5 billion. So basically all of the traditional sources of funds are going into the SHOP to maintain the state highways, and we still have problems with the state highways. kind of a mitigating factor was Prop 42. It used to go into the general fund of the state budget, but in 2003 we pulled it out and reserved it for transportation uses. So basically, 40% of Prop 42 now is dedicated to the STIP, and that's the only funding there.
How much is that?
The STIP, the Prop 42 is about 1.5 billion now. So 40% of that. And that's statewide.
That's a significant amount.
It is a significant amount, but it's a lot less than we were getting. And so, you know, all the black numbers are kind of about the same. We're assuming that,
You said
sure,
it's a lot less than we were getting.
because we're not sharing in the state and federal highway funds any longer.
But the amount that you described ranged from 132 to 800 million.
Yes.
And 40% of 1.5 billion is about 700 million, so.
But that's statewide.
Oh, statewide?
Yeah.
The figures, the 132 to 800 were city?
Yes.
Dollar amount?
We're LA County.
LA County, okay,
Sorry.
the MTA basically.
Yes.
And so what piece does LA County get of the 650 million?
It's roughly by population, so
We get like 30%.
about a third.
So that would be like 200 million?
Yeah. And then not all of it shows.
So it's, depending on which year you're looking at it, it's more or less, but it's mostly less.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The big changes in this are the call for projects has gone down from, we were getting about $40 or $50 million a year. We're looking at maybe 10 million, given the 132. And the transportation earmarks are up in the air right now. We don't know where that's going to be. Hopefully we get more, but I'm not sure. One of the things that's pointed to often is congestion pricing. Congestion pricing can deal with cost of living and construction increases if it's indexed, if they change the prices as they go. It does capture fuel efficiency and alternatively fueled vehicles, and it does capture increased travel. But we're looking at a fairly limited congestion pricing project on 2 facilities, and we're probably looking at 4 or 5 years out on just that very limited experiment. To do something in a big way, to do it on all facilities, we're looking at least 10 years into the future, I think. And I don't think we can wait another 10 years to do something. And so
I don't want to wait another day.
So one of the things is to look at the possibility of raising the excise tax. I know that people don't like that, but it does do a lot of what congestion pricing does. There's very little cost to increasing that. Congestion pricing is going to come with a fairly big price tag to implement, and it can, if we do it, it can be a interim measure for the next 10 years while we're waiting for congestion pricing or some other mechanism to come along. But the big problem is that it hasn't kept up with inflation or construction cost increases. We've left it for 14 years.
On what?
On gasoline sales. 18
So we
cents.
would be incentivizing using more gas?
Not if we increase the tax on it.
If I could comment, you know what the Europeans do? They have a $3 to $4 hit on a gallon of gas, believe it or not. And they're up at $9 or $10 and have been always dramatically, it's not pennies, they've had dollars literally. And they literally year after year after year reinvested in their infrastructure mass transit and everything else. And, you know, we screaming because it goes up $1 and all that, but we basically don't tax our gasoline significantly enough to make a significant impact. We just do a nickel or a dime.
I view it differently.
I know.
If government generates revenue by the use of gas, then we are less inclined to reduce the use of gas. And I've always thought that the method of collecting taxes on gas was counterproductive in the long run, because it creates a mindset that depends on gasoline. And so I'm not really excited about your proposal. I think we really need to create the incentives around using alternative fuel. And
certainly.
You could also say that the more you charge for gas, the less people are going to use it.
Right.
That's never been the case.
Well, we haven't charged enough.
And I think that the federal excise tax has not been lifted since
1994.
1994.
And the state tax has not been increased.
What's the taxes that the county could implement if the county board of supervisors wanted to? And if you don't know, check into it, because there's something in their administrative code that allows the county to increase taxes there. I don't know what it is.
The administrative code. I think the state allows certain counties to charge a local sales tax.
For gasoline?
Because
we have to
for
put
anything, I think.
Well, I know that, but we had to put it on the ballot.
No.
We put it on the ballot.
You had to put, that's what
There
happened.
may be
on
some
the Metro
mechanism,
Park.
though, that allows counties to do something. I'm going back in my mind.
I think
I
there
wouldn't,
was.
I wouldn't mind a discussion about increasing the excise tax, but I'm about to introduce a motion to decrease the sale, to pass state legislation to decrease the sales tax on alternative fuel vehicles. Unless we do that, I'm telling you, we've never reduced the use of gas.
Yeah.
And the more we tax it, the price of gas is still far less than just about anywhere in the world.
Oh, absolutely.
And so we're still incentivizing using gas vehicles.
Right. That's the key problem. While most countries, not just Europe, but in Asia too, the price of gas is much, much higher than we have here. And that discourages people from driving, like we do.
Yeah. And I think one of the other...
I agree, but what I'm saying is that if we increase the excise tax incrementally, a very small amount, it's going to have little impact on the use of these vehicles. But what I'm sick and tired of seeing is all these car dealerships with Humvees and SUVs that aren't selling, but they should be replaced with alternative fuel vehicles that would sell if we created the right incentives.
Right.
We're not creating those incentives.
But I think we're dealing with two different problems. One is dealing with our dependence on foreign fuel and the negative environmental impacts that come on, and so that's why we would want to have more people use alternative fuel vehicles. What we're trying to deal with on the other end is our crumbling infrastructure and our inability to maintain it, and our inability to deal with congestion on the other hand. And so the thing about the excise tax, at least in the state of California, it is virtually a user fee. It only goes to the roadways, to maintenance, rehab, and to provide additional roadways. On the federal side, it's a little bit less clear, because while most of it goes to roadways and rehab and new roadways, they pull out a portion of it for the mass transit account. So it does go to bus service. One could argue that is a benefit to the auto user also, but it's less clear as a user fee.
Well, I just want to state it for the record, that from a purist conversionist thinking mentality, the idea is to transition our economy off the dependence of gas, which causes our society much greater economic burden, and not just because of the infrastructure of transportation, but because of health care, the high rate of asthma, the high rate of cancer that is caused by petroleum fuel dependency. So if you're talking about converting our economy, you reduce a lot of the burdens of the costs elsewhere from leaking out of our governmental system, and you could focus them more on the transportation system if you're not so dependent on gas. I'm just saying that I think there's a negative impact of relying on the tax from gasoline to the extent that government officials then it sort of psychologically or unintentionally are dependent on that income, so they don't work so hard to incentivize
I understand what you're saying.
alternative fuel vehicles.
But-
and I think we need to look more at how to create incentives to use alternative fuel vehicles and reduce the economic burdens elsewhere that we could then put into the infrastructure.
I understand.
But it's low-hanging fruit, it's simple, it's easy for people to understand, so just tax it.
Well, but the other thing is that,
Okay, and then we're going to conclude.
I mean, the two things that we're talking about in the longer term were congestion pricing, which will assist the movement in your direction, and the same thing you're doing.
I'm not, just by not answering doesn't mean I agree with you.
Okay.
So,
It just
but
means
there-
people can buy more access to freeways, and
Well,
other people can't.
The other options that have been proposed, and maybe we can share with all the members of the committee the report that was done by the federal government, which is looking completely at the whole system, because the report that the reason we asked for this report was specifically to look at our funding needs and under the current structure, how we're faring and how we will look at our priorities going forward. And so the one of the other suggestions is that you have underneath your car, Big Brother, which good or bad, people have argued both sides, which says how many miles are you driving, and you're taxed on the miles you drive, not necessarily on the gasoline, which would look at a different way in which people are using their vehicles. But what we were interested in here is not only is looking clearly at what our where our sources of funding are, but our expenditures. And I know that's what is kind of the next step for you all to come back as we go forward. And after November, we'll also know whether Measure R, because you listed that in here, the city initiatives.
Well, but more importantly, let's not ignore the fact that for the last 8 years, we have an oil baron president whose mentality in terms of distributing a transportation agenda is driven by that mentality.
Which we're not arguing that. And what we're saying is that this item before us is specifically about where we're going right
Exactly my point. That under a different president, we have to be able to assess what the mindset of that new president is going to be, because the strategies that the federal government had in the last 8 years are not going to be the strategies as we move forward, no matter who the president is.
Right. But I think in either case, we weren't looking for this kind of increase as the long-term permanent solution. We think there are better solutions out there, but they're all going to take time. The alternative fuel vehicles on a large-scale basis will take time. The congestion pricing will take time. This was proposed as an interim measure to help stem the tide against our crumbling infrastructure before it gets to the point where we have to rebuild everything. Temporary measure.
Because I think we're looking at both short-term and long-term, and the Safety Lou reauthorization is one of the ways in which they're going to look at long-term, which is why the 1912 Commission was set up specifically to look at what Safety Lou proposed, and in its reauthorization, how we would make the changes and reflect. And I think it's clear in that report that there were differing positions between the current administration and others that served on that Safety Lou that are really looking at a countrywide kind of thing as well. So we do have two speakers, Damian Goodman and Arnold Sachs. You can stay there, Mike.
Madam Chair, I'm just going to waive my public comment, and then you guys get to speak. I love it when you guys get to speak first, then you let the public speak. Usually, in all these other entities, the public has to speak first. We don't know what you guys
Sometimes do a little bit both, yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think essentially what you're getting to, and it was what Councilmember Alarcon was saying regarding the gas taxes, and I know Councilmember Rosenthal has talked about grade separations in the past. There are a whole bunch of things and benefits to these transportation projects, and you shouldn't just be looking at transportation taxes as the only means. Or you should be saying, when you bring in a development, depending on how and if there are transportation alternatives, you should be taxing that development given that they're not going to have to be spending the money for traffic mitigation. You should be taxing or going toward air quality resources and putting those towards transportation, public safety resources in the case of grade separations. And the other problem, at least I see with the gas tax, is that I think it's on a per dollar basis instead of a per gallon basis.
It's both.
It's both? It's both. Well, let's increase the one on the per gallon basis.
Right.
And, we're not going to get rid of cars, and we're going to have more people coming. So as long as they're here, I like taxing them. And as a transit rider who doesn't own a car, I'm not affected by it too badly. Well, although my groceries are, I suppose. But thank you.
Couple things. You mentioned call for projects, 2007 call for projects. Long-range plans, are they different? Are they the same? We had 2001 long-range plan from MTA. We still don't know where we stand on that. These are funding sources you're looking at, but there's a lot of problems because I find that we have problems when you're defining projects. There's a couple of projects that are being called for by, as part of the Measure R, the downtown connector, which is essentially the old blue line that should have been done in 1980. When the project was first established, it should have been gone. It was from the information put out by MTA. It should have gone from Pasadena to Long Beach. And the fact that they kept that gap in there while they built the gold line is standard operating procedure for MTA. And how much of Los Angeles is on board of starting these projects, running out of money, and then starting a second project, and then running out of money on that, and then starting a third project and running out of money on that. And so you have 3 or 4 or 5 projects that are half-assed projects because they don't not finished. And the gentleman mentioned that $1 million project in 1994 will get you 40% of that project. So the downtown connector, which somebody clarified for me, and I'm clarifying, it's just is the blue line connection. Why was it not finished in the first place? It changes the whole playing field of all the other projects that are involved. Because the red line wouldn't have gone to Union Station. The red line would have started at 7th and Metro and gone westbound, and made it to Fairfax. It was funded to go to Fairfax. It was funded to go from Western and Wilshire to San Vicente and Pico. As I mentioned earlier, funded. The only project that wasn't funded was the digging at 3rd and Fairfax. And what did they do? They dug at 3rd and Fairfax. And what happened? It affected all the construction in L.A.
Thank you. So, colleagues, Michael, do you want to add anything before we go on? Do you want to add anything else on your report?
No.
The only thing I want to say, God bless you for doing it, but I'm hopeful that when we have a new president, that our city unites strongly with our congressional delegation on what our city's priorities should be, and that we really go for the bacon this time. To me, it's really pathetic to see California never get its fair share of federal dollars on every level. And we need it. We are the breadbasket of the nation. So I look forward to that new energy and that new day and a concerted effort by our congressional delegation. They're the ones who carry the water back there. We're 1/8 of the House of Representatives, and we just don't seem to get nothing. So I look forward to us creating the strategy with the mayor and our colleagues here and figuring out how we can get a better piece of the pie.
I think it needs to be said that under the Clinton administration, we got more than a fair share of the federal dollars in compared to other jurisdictions. And the chairperson of this committee had a little bit to do with
who was that?
A lot of that. So to say that the federal government in general, I think on the one hand it is unfair. The Bush administration has been horrendous in terms of its treatment of California, and perhaps that's why the economy is so affected, given that we are the 5th largest economy in the world. And an investment into that economy would have perhaps benefited the entire country. And the peak of the foreclosure crisis was in California. So, but it also leans to agree with you, Mr. Rosendahl, that it has everything to do with the next president.
That's right.
And our strategic agenda, if aligned properly, can have even better ramifications for California, particularly on issues like health care, more important than transportation, under the right federal administration.
We're looking forward to that on housing, too, another thing you had some interest in before, too. So what we'd like to do is have you come back in 30 days with a kind of fun. Here we now have, here's where our money comes from, and anything of Measure R, and then next on kind of the expenses, so we can see where we're on that part of it. We just have one more item, Mr. Rosendahl. I mean, if you need to leave, that's fine. We can do it. But I don't know if there's any questions on the next item, which is item number 7, which is implementing what our mini call was for in 2007, and what the council had approved. This is just implementing what?
Yes, just receiving the funds and purchasing the vehicles.
Okay. So unless you all have questions, we do have a card for Mr. Sachs. He just gave the report. It was very succinct. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Arnold Sachs. In the interest of clarifying this very quickly, at the last NTA board meeting, or I believe, the one in September, there was quite a contentious argument put forth by Supervisor Molina regarding the mailer on Proposition R, the half-cent sales tax, and where the funding came from. And she had it on good account that the funding came from Proposition A. And I believe that Board Member Katz and another board member got together with their staffs, or their staffs got together and had a discussion, and she was told it didn't come from Proposition A. It came from a different Proposition A. So clarifying which Proposition A is kind of important. But additionally, they also mentioned that it wasn't just funding, it was funding paid for by interest that the state paid back on money it borrowed from whatever. That being said, they borrowed from transportation funds, and they paid MTA back with interest, and the interest was used to pay for the flyer. That being said, if the interest comes back, if there's a project to be funded, and the state borrows that money, and the project is put on hold, is the interest that is paid back, what is the relative gap that comes to the forefront between the original project's cost, the delay in the project because the state has borrowed the money, and the fact that the state now is paying back the money it borrowed and the interest? Is there a gap between what the new price comes to and what the interest will cover as far as what the old price and new price of the project is? I hope I made that kind of clear. Again, it's like a project budgeted for $100 million, the state borrows $100 million, and they pay it back in 2 years. In 2 years, that $100 million project could be $150 million. The state going to pay back $50 million in interest, or what happens to that project?
Yeah.
Does that leave gaps in the call for projects also?
Thank you. And this one was particularly the one that has already gone through, so not the future ones. Any comments, colleagues? Okay.
So moved on that.
Thank you. We have 2 public comment cards. I don't know if you have to leave. Ann Bradley and Arnold Sachs.
I gave copies of summarizing.
Indeed.
I'm a bus rider, so I'm car-free and happily so, and a great fan of Metro and LADOT as a rider. But there are 2 issues that I'd like to bring to your attention that don't cost really anything, that are very severe. At this committee a couple of weeks ago, you talked about making it easier to hail a cab, and I would love the committee's commitment to making it easier to board a bus. Currently, rapid and local bus stops are indiscriminately separated. Now, you may not even know what I'm talking about, but the fact is that some stops, the stops are together, the rapid and the local, and at others they are separated, causing a nerve-wracking and dangerous situation for bus riders at a time when I think we're all have a heightened awareness about safety. Separate stops force passengers to strain to see the oncoming bus and sprint across busy intersections, many times with children, after they've had a long day working, because they want to get the first bus. The fact is, when you're going home, you want the first bus, folks. You're going to have to trust me on this one. There is not 2 separate bus riderships. It's the first bus. Since rapid buses stop at busy intersections, pedestrian accidents could happen. Metro Rapid Group's hypothetical 5-second saved reason is specious, because when council districts say, no, I don't want them separated for a variety of reasons, maybe the business owner in front of the stops aren't separated. Now, this might be something that none of you are really aware of, and even some of your transportation deputies, but it is one of the most dangerous things happening. It's inconsistent. For example, if you're standing at Sunset and Parkman, where 4 buses stop, they all come together, no problems. But if you're standing at other stops, such as across the street, the Rapids over here and the locals stop here, and people have to run, and it's insane. And this is people on the 9th floor of One Gateway Plaza making a decision, and they don't ride those buses. And I beg you to please recognize how absolutely terrible this is. One final point, okay, if I may. And that is, please, in the next year, be more rigorous about the dashes that are simply not working. You have a Warner Center dash. What it is, it's a commuter express that brings people from Ventura to Warner Center. And so since it's there, it provides dash service during the day. Typically, 2 people get on that bus per run. You also have to ask, why is the City of Los Angeles funding a dash to bring people from Ventura? Rick Cole's a really smart guy, the city manager of Ventura. And he can figure out a way to get bus service from Ventura into Warner Center.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ann. Thanks for being here. Arnold.
Funding bus service from Ventura. I think I brought that up, funding bus service from the South Bay with the Commuter Express also. Why is there a Commuter Express running through the South Bay? There was just a update on the downtown connector. And one of the things they talked about was running a shuttle bus from Grand Avenue to Little Tokyo. MTA. So why is MTA going to run a shuttle bus from Grand Avenue to Little Tokyo, and yet the city is running commuter expresses out to Ventura and the South Bay? I didn't know that. Shouldn't they be like opposite? Shouldn't the city be running the shuttle buses and the MTA running the commuter, any kind of express in the county? Isn't that their role? Also, I'd like to get, if you don't mind, passing some kind of, they've started to ticket quite frequently at MTA headquarters. I don't know if they bring it up here, but they only have one crosswalk from the Union Station to the bus, waiting for people to wait for buses. So if you are leaving Metro headquarters, you have to walk all the way to the other end, pretty much 3/4 of the way to get to the crosswalk at Union Station. Could you maybe pass some kind of, ask them if they could possibly put in a second crosswalk? Would that be under your jurisdiction? Would that be under your purview? I'm just asking.
On MTA property, I believe.
Well, I'll bring it up at the MTA board meeting, but
Yeah.
it would be nice to be able to have, you get a ticket. They got plenty of sheriffs out there now. They give you a jaywalking ticket for not crossing at the crosswalk. And it's since the buses don't wait for the people in the first place, you know, they're coming up there 10 seconds before their due time. The holding lot, they're there, but when they're on MTA property, we're not waiting for anybody. If you're not there, that's your problem. Wait for the next bus. And I have to disagree. Vote no on R. It's a track record thing, Councilman.
Thank you. Thank you. I see no other public comment cards. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.